Welcome to our Habitat for Humanity home maintenance class. My name is Paul Gusty, and I'm a volunteer instructor with Habitat for Humanity. I always like to start these classes with a disclaimer. I am not a professional carpenter or a plumber or an electrician or a professional painter. I am, in fact, just like you. I am a homeowner. And I have maybe gotten a little bit more experience than you have at this point in your stage of home ownership because I've owned several houses and I've gained some experience working on them over the years. So I would like to share with you today what I've learned, and maybe you will take that and become more confident about tackling some of the projects that will come up in your house. So with that said, let's get started. And now we're going to move on to painting, the topic of how to paint a room. Now, I've taught the class several times, and the students always tell me that they're really excited. One of the first things they're excited about is to get some color into their house, paint the room some different color than what it is. A lot of times the rooms are all white. So this is how we recommend that you go about setting up to prepare to paint. So you need a few supplies, not a lot, but a few. And you can use a lot of them if you clean them. You can use them year after year. So here's one of those examples. It's a paint tray. And you can see that we've used this before, and it's kind of rusty here, and it's got paint on it. And that's okay, because what we recommend is that you buy a very cheap plastic disposable paint tray liner. And these things are designed to go fit right inside a rigid metal paint tray. And so when you're done painting, you can take the liner out and throw it away. And so this is only a couple of bucks, and it works really well. The other thing that we're going to be using today is paint masking tape. You probably have seen this blue tape in stores everywhere. And there's also a green tape, different variety, but it's a paint masking tape as well, and it's just as good. And we're going to be masking off molding and other things that we'll talk about. Then you need a brush for cutting in, and we'll talk about the cutting in process in a bit. I recommend what's called a sash brush, or some people call it an angle brush, where the bristles are cut at an angle instead of straight across. And that gives you the ability to have a point. You get your paint up here, and the point will help you draw a finer line and be more precise about your painting. And then a putty knife and some spackling will be helpful to prepare the wall before you start painting. And then you need a roller frame like this, and this again is used. We've used this many times before. If you clean it, keep it clean, you can use it forever. And then you can buy these paint roller covers, and we'll talk about them in a little bit, about which ones to buy and why. And this cover, the cover just slides right over the paint frame like that, and now you're good to go. You can get a pole like this, and I think this just came out of a broom. It just unscrewed out of a broom. And there are threads at the bottom of the roller frame, and you can just screw in this pole, and you dip your paint in, and then you can turn around and use the length of the pole to reach the ceiling, and you can come down and go all the way to the floor and then back up. And it's much easier on your back if you're painting a full wall, or the ceiling too, for that matter. You do this across the ceiling, and you don't have to be on a ladder, and it helps your back, and it'll go faster than just doing the paint roller by hand. Okay, so I would recommend doing that. For our demo today, we're going to end up painting by hand, because we've set up a special unit here for us to demonstrate how to paint, and it's just like a half a wall, so we'll just use a hand roller. But before we paint, sadly, there's a lot of preparation that has to be done. So let's talk about what you need to do to prepare. Really, the amount of time that you'll spend on preparing is probably double the amount of time that you'll spend actually painting. It's very important to prepare properly so that you have a good product when you're done. So the first thing is that when you open up a can of paint, there's going to be fumes that come out of here. It's going to fill the room up. And if you're in an enclosed room, especially a small enclosed room, over time, the fumes could get too strong and it might irritate you. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So open a window if you've got a window, and set up a fan, have some air blowing around, blow that air out of the window, and you can kind of have a more easy time of painting. And then the other thing you need to do is to take furniture that you might have in the room already and move it to the center of the room and just get it away from the walls so you don't get paint splatter on the furniture. And then you can buy really cheap clear plastic sheeting and just drape it over the furniture. And that will keep any spatter from getting and ruining your furniture. And then you want to get on a ladder. If you have a ceiling light that hangs down, you want to get on a ladder, and you could actually use some paint tape to tape the base of the unit that's in the ceiling, and then take that plastic tape again and wrap it around your fixture and tape it off with this so that it's just kind of covered and protected from any splatter. Then what you're going to want to do is to go to all of your electrical outlets around the room and remove the covers. There's going to be an outside cover of each outlet. There's a screw at the top, a screw at the bottom, and just undo that cover and set it aside, and don't lose the screws. And then do that to every outlet in the room that you're painting. And then you go to the wall switches, the light switches, and there's a cover also around those. Take those screws out, put those aside. And then you can come along, when you've done all the cover removing, come along and take your paint masking tape, just tear off a little piece, and you're not going to remove the outlet. That's all wired and it's hot, and you just leave it alone. So you can come along and just tape right on the surface of the outlet or the wall switch. And then if you do happen to get a roller that covers this, you won't get paint on your outlet. So when you're done, you pull it off, and now you have a nice, fresh, clean outlet that looks really spiffy. So when you're done with all the light switches and the outlets, we'll use a smaller, narrower paint masking tape, and we're going to cover the edges of the molding where the wall meets the molding. This will prevent paint getting on the molding, and you don't have to be quite so careful about painting if you take this prep step and cover the molding with this tape. So let me show you how that works. We have some molding back here behind me, and I'll just go ahead and do it and show you how it works. So you start with the molding as close to the corner as you can get, and then get it right up in the seam where the molding meets the wall. It's tough to get it started. And then I like to pull it back a little bit with my right hand. See, it's still unsticking. And then just start to push it down with the other hand, and then I keep some pressure on it so it keeps taut. And then I keep pushing down, and sometimes I get too close to the wall and the tape starts climbing up the wall. So you just pull up the tape until you get it exactly where you want it. Lay out some more tape, get it wherever you want it, and just, I'm using my finger. Some people use a putty knife, and they'll come along with a putty knife to make sure you get a good seal. It's important to get a good seal with the molding so that paint doesn't like drip down and find its way underneath the paint masking tape. And I'm just going to finish this. And there we have it. So make sure, then you just tear it off at the edge, go over this a couple of times, and we're good to go there. Once you do that across your entire room, which will take some time because you need to do it carefully, you're ready to start thinking about actually painting. You have a lot of decisions to make before you even buy a can of paint. You have got to obviously pick your color. So that's the fun part. What color do you want? But there's a lot more you have to think about before you buy that can. You need to know or decide on what finish of paint you want on your walls, or in other words, think about the sheen or the shine that you might get from a coat of paint. You have your gradations of increasing sheen. After flat, you've got eggshell, and then the next step up from that is satin, which is probably the most common wall paint that people use. And then beyond that, you go up to semi-gloss and then to high gloss. The semi-gloss is best, or the gloss, is best used in humid environments, like a kitchen or a bathroom, maybe even a laundry room. But in a living room or a bedroom, most people pick eggshell or satin. And then the other thing you need to think about is the texture on your wall, and that has to do with the roller covers. So you can choose quite a different range of roller covers. They're made out of lamb's wool, some of them are artificial fibers. And they all have their pros and cons, and you can do your own research about which is preferable for you. Personally, I tend to just buy the least, or not the least, I don't want to buy the least expensive, but I buy middle of the road stuff. I don't want to spend $20 on a roller cover, but I don't want to spend $1.50 either. So quality does matter, but a lot of times you can get away with the middle category. All right, so then what you have here is the choice not only of what the fabric is, but it's called nap. And this one is a thicker nap. You can just see the difference. This one is, I believe, 1/2 inch. You can see me squeeze, and my finger goes right into the nap. It's got a lot of material here. And this one is a 3/8 inch nap, so it doesn't. You can see the difference. My finger is sitting well above the nap on the 3/8 inch. So why do you care? The thicker the nap, the more paint it's going to pull up and absorb when you dip it into your tray. And it'll come out and you'll just have a lot of paint on this roller. And this one, you'll have less paint. So why does that matter? As you go about rolling, let me put one of these things on here. When you go about rolling, it's going to leave paint, obviously, on the wall. That's the whole purpose of painting. But the more paint you have and you roll off, the last bit of rolling kind of pulls the paint away from the wall a little bit. And that's going to give texture to the wall. The paint isn't going to sit just flat smooth. It'll have a little bit of texture. You can go to almost any wall in where you're living now and look at that wall, and if you stand at the side of the wall, you can probably see a little bit of texture in the paint itself that's on the wall. If you want something that's just flat smooth, like as smooth as your wallboard is, your drywall, get a 1/4 inch nap. And that will not leave much paint on the wall as you pull it away from the wall with rolling. So that will give you very, very smooth wall. It's a choice. It's a design choice that you get to make. We're going to use the 3/8 inch nap for our demo here. And the only other choice that you can make or need to make is after you're done painting your room with the first coat of paint, you step back and you maybe wait for it to dry, step back and look at it and see, all right, is this the color I wanted, or would a second coat deepen the color, make it richer, or is it good as it is? Is it what you expected in color? And also look very carefully, examine the wall that you finished and make sure that it's even and that there's no little spots where the wall color was showing through before you painted. And if you have a lot of those, you probably need to do a second coat. And so did the color come out right, and did you evenly cover the whole wall? Okay, now one other thing I want to point out is there's a tremendous amount of information for you on the back of your can that you're going to purchase in the paint store. And I highly recommend that you take the time in the paint store before you buy it to read the information on the can. It's going to tell you the finish type. It's going to say satin, eggshell, whatever, so that's important. It's going to tell you where they recommend you should use it or shouldn't use it. So maybe it's not to be used outdoors, or maybe it's specially suited for a high humidity environment like a kitchen. So they might tell you that on the can. They'll tell you, obviously, what their estimated coverage is in terms of square feet, how much they think that you're going to get. So you can measure your room and then see if that fits within the confines of their recommendation of coverage. And then it'll tell you whether or not they recommend, they being the paint company, recommend that you apply a primer before their coat of paint. And then it'll give you abnormal things like drying times, how many hours it takes to dry, how many hours you should wait before you apply a second coat if you need to do a second coat. So that information is on the can. It'll tell you whether you can use water and soap to clean the brushes and the roller covers, or whether you need something like a paint thinner to clean them. And that has to do whether it's latex. It can be cleaned in water, and if you get into an oil-based paint, you're going to have to go to the paint thinners, mineral spirits, that kind of thing. There's a thing called VOC. It stands for volatile organic compounds. And you'll see a VOC rating on each can. It's required by law now. If you've got someone in your household who's, asthmatic or has issues like that, or very sensitive to things that they find in the environment, pick a low VOC paint. Right before we want to put paint on the wall, we need to also make sure that we have a drop cloth on the floor to prevent the floor from spatters and spills and whatnot. If you go to the hardware store or one of the big box stores, you'll find numerous examples of different kinds of drop cloths. What I like is a 2-layer drop cloth. It's probably around $9-10 for a big area of it. And it's got, the top layer is paper-based, and like a brown paper base. And the bottom layer is this thinner plastic, like we talked about. So the plastic keeps any paint that drops on the paper from dripping through and getting to the floor, but the paper surface, it's a little bit absorbent. So if you do drop some paint, instead of sitting and bubbling up, like if it was just plastic, it would just bubble up and then you would be tracking paint all over. But it drops on the paper, and it kind of absorbs, and it will spread out a little bit, and it won't be as bad when you start to walk around, and you won't be tracking as much paint around. And one other thing, we mentioned this before, but here's our demo. We're going to look at the wall, and we're going to look to see if there's any imperfections or any nail holes or bumps or something that just isn't nice and smooth. And if you do find one, like we said before, you'll take a putty knife and some spackling, and you'll just get some spackle on here, and you'll just and then smooth it out just like that. And then let that dry, and then the wall is nice and clean, like we really have here. But don't forget that step, because that'll be important to get a really good quality paint job, to make sure your wall is really nice and smooth. Once you got all that done, we're going to be ready to open up the can of paint. Now, one thing I should say is, before you leave the paint store, ask them to put your can of paint in their mechanical paint shaker machine. And they'll shake it up real good. It takes about, 3-4 minutes. And it's free. They'll do it for free. And then they'll hand it to you. And then you've got a thoroughly mixed paint that you don't have to worry about. So ideally, we've done that. So now we're going to open up this can of paint. And this has been used before. We've used this for another project. So I'm going to make sure that I stir it, make sure that it hasn't separated. Sometimes if the paint sits too long, oils might separate and they'll float to the surface. and then the body of the paint is down below, the heavier part. So I think it's pretty well stirred, but I'm just going to give it a little bit of a stir here. Make sure I don't see any oil separated, and I don't. It looks pretty thoroughly mixed. All right, and then I'm just going to take some of this excess paint off the stirring stick. So that's good to go, and I'll put that down. And so what we're going to first do is, of course, pour some of the paint into our disposable liner tray. And you want to put in enough to fill the well of the liner tray. And we have a small surface here, so I'm going to do a little bit less than I might normally do, but a little bit more, just to fill the well here, the deep part of the tray. Okay, so I'm just going to dip the paintbrush into our paint here. And I'm going to get a little bit, like maybe the top inch or two soaked up into the paint. And the brushes, you don't want to, here, let me just show you this. You don't want this. You don't want so much paint on the brush that it starts dripping. Because if you just put this on the wall, the paint is just going to drip down the wall, and you're going to have to deal with that. Okay, so we're just going to make sure we have the right amount of paint on our brush. I'm going to dab it off a little bit, and that's maybe a little too much. And that should be good. And let's turn around and see how this works. I have a nice little step stool so I can get up to the top and pretend that this is a ceiling, because we're gonna cut in. This process, by the way, that we're doing is called cutting in, and it's a standard paint terminology where you kind of cut in the corners with a brush, and then we're going to fill in the base of the wall with the roller. So cutting in is this part here. It's actually pretty darn easy. You don't want too much paint on the wall. And spread the paint out pretty good. And the other thing is you want to make sure that you don't leave brush strokes. So like here, I picked up the brush right here, and I can see a ridge of paint right here. And if I let that dry, it'll dry with that ridge sticking out. So I'm just going to brush it out. And just kind of come along, just smooth, and try to get rid of your brush strokes. And this actually looks pretty good there. Now we're going to go and do the corner of the wall. And what you really want to do is get a couple of inches on either side of the corner, because you're not going to be able to get your roller deep into that corner. Okay, now that our cut-in is done, we're ready for the roller. And ideally, if you can do the roller right after you've done the cut-in, kind of like we're doing here, that paint that we have up here might still be wet. Paint dries fairly quickly. It may say 2 to 4 hour drying time, but modern paints tend to dry, that outer surface tend to dry pretty quick. So if you can get the rolling done while your cut-in paint is still wet, you'll be better off. So I'll explain that in a minute, but let's get some paint on this roller. So I've chosen the 3/8 inch nap roller because I don't want a whole lot of paint on this wall. So you dip in, the goal is to get this saturated with paint, but not oversaturated, not dripping. So you just kind of roll it using the nubs. There's little nubs on the paint liner that help you turn the roller. And again, this roller is designed to absorb a fair, even though it's only a 3/8 inch nap, it's designed to absorb a lot of paint. So you roll it across all the surfaces, and so you get it thoroughly full. And then I'm going to kind of go to the upper surface here and use these nubs to take off some excess paint, because we don't want drips. I'm going to start a couple of inches away from what I painted, kind of like here. I can start at the top or I can start at the bottom. And the same thing up there. I'm going to start a couple of inches down from where we had the paint there. So here we are. We're going to be rolling like this. And I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to come back up, and then just come back up and down. And you want to just spread the paint out. And now that I've got a fair amount of the paint off of the roller, now I'm going to come over and intersect with what I had already painted. You don't want to put the roller against this wall here. Or if I'm painting on this side, you don't want to put the roller against this wall, because watch what happens. You can see that? If you run it too close to the other wall, you're going to get these gouges in what you've just painted. So now I have to go back up and trim that. And trim that. So don't do what I just did. I did it on purpose, just to show you. This is called a wet edge. You always work from the wet edge out to the rest of the wall. And we never want to let this dry. You don't want to say, oh gosh, the football game just started. I'm going to go watch the football game for a little bit, and then I'm going to come back and finish. Never stop in the middle of the wall, because what happens is this wet edge will dry, and then you come back and do another coat, and you now have, in this section where you'd have to overlap with the new paint, you've got 2 coats of paint. And that could change the depth of the color, the intensity of the color, and it might look different, and you might end up with a stripe going up and down your wall. You want to just keep rolling out the wall here. We have got some areas that the white is still showing through. And again, you can just go back over and just keep even back over what you've already done. As long as it's wet, you can just keep going back over. Make sure we get enough paint all over. And now I'll come down as close as I can, because again, the texture comes off of the roller, and it's a different texture than the brush leaves. So the more you can get done with the roller, the more uniform texture you'll have. And that's all there is to painting. And that concludes our home maintenance course today. Thank you for spending your valuable time with me, and I hope you took away some useful lessons. And remember, if you're taking this course for credit, please take the test at the end of the course.